Welcome back to the Home Body podcast, where we explore the deeper aspects of mental health, the nervous system, and healing beyond traditional models. So today's episode is for those of you who have done the journaling, had deep therapy sessions, you've gained the insights, but you still feel like something is missing. So talk therapy is a really powerful tool and something that I definitely think is an important piece of the puzzle. But healing isn't just about understanding our emotions from that intellectual level. It's also about addressing the body as well. So our lifestyle, our environment, our movement, everything that comes into play in our nervous system that expresses itself as mental health. So in this episode, we're going to explore the limitations of talk therapy and why verbalizing our emotions and experiences isn't always the full picture to overcoming past traumas and personal experiences and how to integrate them, and how our brain processes emotions versus cognition, and why some memories always stay stuck. We're also going to look at the role of lifestyle, factors like gut health and light exposure in the mental well-being space. And we're going to look at the importance of somatic therapy in addressing the root cause and stored trauma. And then we're going to have a look at some simple integrative practices you can start using today for deeper transformation. So let's dive into today's episode. So let's start off with why talk therapy can sometimes not feel like it fills up the whole piece of the puzzle. And talk therapy really helps us to process thoughts, recognize these patterns, bring them to the forefront of our minds, and make sense of our past experiences. But for some people, and for many people, it doesn't create that full body shift that is needed for deep healing. And what I mean by full body shift, it's that feeling of integration, of this part of me now makes sense, and it no longer feels like this prickly or pokey or spiky part that sticks into the side and causes sometimes physical sensations as well. So here's why talking can sometimes not bridge that gap between the brain and the body. So the brain's processing centers, our emotional experiences are primarily stored in what is called the limbic system, which is the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. And this part of the brain is responsible for our emotions, our survival responses, like our sympathetic fight or flight response, and our dorsal vagal freeze response or shutdown response. And it is also involved in our implicit memory. So we often feel things before we can name them. We know that we have this feeling before we actually can verbalize and name the experience. So the cognitive brain versus the emotional brain. Speech and reasoning occur in the prefrontal cortex and the Broca's area of the brain. So this is the part of the brain that is responsible for language. And when we talk about trauma, we engage this cognitive part of the brain, which can help distance. It creates space between the painful emotion and the actual intellectualizing and verbalizing of the experience itself. However, it doesn't necessarily process or resolve that physiological stress that is still experienced within the body. So this is why some people can say, I can understand my trauma logically, but I still feel stuck in it. I still feel like it's playing out in real time. So if talking isn't enough, what else can we do? And this is where the space in which I operate comes in which we want to create a full picture. So somatic processing, neuroscience, polyvagal theory, movement, light, breath, the what we eat and how we nourish our nervous system to help us move from understanding to actually experiencing healing. So let's look at what is somatic therapy first and foremost and why it matters. So somatic therapy, or soma, is really just working with the body. So it focuses on the body's role in healing emotional trauma. So unlike traditional talk therapy, which primarily involves talking and working through thoughts and verbal processing, somatic practices help address the stored tension and emotions, the physiological stress that can linger in the body after a traumatic event has passed, many decades after a traumatic event has passed. So Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, the author of The Body Keeps the Score, explains that trauma isn't just a memory. It's something that gets embedded in our nervous system, our muscles, and even our posture. So somatic therapy works to release that stored energy through body-based practices rather than just talking about it. Some common somatic therapy techniques include breath work, so conscious breathing exercises that regulate the nervous system and can calm that fight or flight response. Or in some cases, it can activate that sympathetic nervous system so that we can bring up the stored trauma or experiences to the surface, like in conscious connected breath work. We also use things like grounding techniques, so engaging our physical sensations to anchor ourselves in the present moment to shift out of dissociation or anxiety. We also use tools like mindful movement. So anything that we can do in a way that allows us to shift or discharge energy or stored tension can really be beneficial in somatically processing, integrating, and releasing past trauma or experiences. We also use a lot of body awareness techniques, so things that create the connection between the mind and the body. So what is it that I'm actually feeling? What are the sensations that I'm feeling? Can I notice any tension in my body? Can I notice numbness or tightness, maybe warmth or coolness that are lingering in different parts of my body? And when I start to drop into that space, what comes up for me? And how can I tend to those things, those sensations, emotions, feelings, and the subsequent thoughts and expression of them in a way that nourishes my nervous system from that bottom up approach rather than trying to shift my thinking around it? How do I utilize my body to become more aware of what is going on internally? So these techniques allow the body to process what words sometimes can't do, right? So now that we understand what somatic body-based healing actually is, let's explore how things like our everyday habits can also kind of play into our mental health and well-being, like nutrition and sunlight exposure, how they can actually support our mental health and play a huge role in our healing and transformation process as well. So I want to start off with the gut-brain connection and mental health. So you've probably heard of the phrase trust your gut before, and the science actually confirms that our gut plays a really, really major role in our emotional regulation. So we have something called the gut-brain axis, and this is how the gut and the brain actually communicate via the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is a key player in our parasympathetic nervous system, with about 75 to 80% of our parasympathetic fibers actually being housed within our vagus nerve. And about 90% of our serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that regulates mood, is produced in the gut, not the brain, right? And dopamine, about 70% of our dopamine is produced in our gut, not our brain. So the connection between our gut and our brain is really complex and deep, but it plays a huge role in how it communicates what our body needs, in how we actually are driven to certain behaviors, how we actually do certain things is going to be impacted by this complex communication pathway between our gut and our brain via our vagus nerve. So the health of our vagus nerve is going to impact the health of our gut and the health of our brain as well. The role of microbiota. So a 2021 study in Nature Reviews Gastroenterology and Hepatology found that gut dysbiosis, so that is microbiome, so your gut bacteria essentially is becoming imbalanced in the wrong way. So you've got more bad bacteria than good bacteria, is linked to higher levels of systemic inflammation, which can really trigger anxiety and depression, So inflammation, chronic inflammation from stress, past trauma, how we're nourishing our body is going to impact the expression of your mental health. This is fundamentally important. So we want to take note of how we are nourishing our nervous system and start to shift it in a way that is going to be more beneficial for our whole body functioning. So reducing processed foods and sugars really helps lower chronic inflammation. Prebiotics, which are fiber-rich foods that kind of feed our gut bacteria, and probiotics that you can get through fermented foods, which is the way that I've found best to get probiotics into my body rather than taking a supplement form to help good gut bacteria diversity. And omega-3 fatty acids found in natural seafoods like salmon and flax seeds can help fight inflammation in both the gut and the brain. The vagus nerve is actually a really important component in an anti-inflammatory process as well. So the more that you are able to nurture your gut microbiome and give yourself really good, nourishing foods that are then translated into our neurotransmitters, but also our immune system and just our overall health, the stronger your vagus nerve is going to become, and the stronger that inflammatory response is going to become as well. So just as our gut health impacts our emotions, so does the light that we expose ourselves to daily. So let's dive into circadian rhythms and how they play a role in our mood and our mental clarity as well. So light exposure plays a really crucial role in regulating our nervous system and emotional well-being, far more than we've ever thought before. And there's more and more research coming out about this now, about how important natural light, so not the blue light that comes from screens or from LED light bulbs, but natural light that comes from the sun, is in our mental health and well-being. So morning light is really fundamentally important for mood regulation. So the simplest, probably the simplest technique that I suggest to all of my clients, but also just to anyone that will listen, is getting up and getting into the natural light in the morning. So natural sunlight exposure first thing in the morning helps us regulate things like cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and melatonin, which is really important for signaling when it is time to go to sleep and helping us fall asleep. So these hormones are responsible for wakefulness and sleep. So cortisol is wakefulness and melatonin for sleep. So a study in the JAMA Psychiatry found that people who get at least 30 minutes of morning sunlight experience fewer symptoms of depression and anxiety. So when your circadian rhythm is in tune with the natural flow of daylight and sunrise, sunset, nighttime, daytime, and then we actually have a far better time of actually dipping into that restorative sleep phase. And it gives us more space in that window of tolerance to build our resilience and to actually take actions and behaviors that are going to nurture our nervous system as well. Blue light causes huge amount of sleep disruption. So excessive blue light exposure at nighttime especially disrupts melatonin production, making it harder to fall asleep and impairing emotional regulation. 2019 study found in Sleep Health found that reducing blue light exposure for at least 2 hours before bed significantly improved sleep quality and emotional resilience. Now, I am not saying that you have to go out and change absolutely everything about your lifestyle. We live in the 21st century and these things are kind of unavoidable. And so I want you to think about how you can reduce the impact that it may have. So things like blue light blocking glasses are really helpful. Also, things like having lamps instead of the lights on above your head are really helpful. Using red tones or orange tones at nighttime in your light bulbs instead of like the bright white lights as well are really helpful. And getting that morning sunlight. So the practical takeaway from this is try to get that morning sunlight. If 30 minutes is not achievable, then can you get 5, 10, 15 minutes of sunlight when you wake up to get your eyeballs into the light? And even if it is overcast, raining, cloudy, all of the things, turning your face towards where the sun would be in the sky and getting your eyes in that direction is still going to be so beneficial for setting your circadian rhythm. We also want to look at reducing blue light exposure in the evening by using blue light blocking glasses or switching to warmer or dim lighting, and keeping screen time to a minimum before bed to support better sleep and emotional recovery. So we have covered a lot about integrating body-based healing and lifestyle adjustments into our healing journey. It's not just about talking about it, it's also about shifting the ways in which we do things. So we're shifting the way we do things, so we're going to feel differently. But how do we bring all of this together in a way that feels really manageable and not overwhelming and completely like push ourselves into a state of shutdown? I'm going to give you some really key takeaways that I want you to walk away from this podcast with. So we'll recap that talk therapy, beautiful piece of the puzzle. It's so powerful, especially some people really resonate with that space and find a lot of benefit from, but it doesn't always look at the aspect of releasing the stored tension or the stress response that is incomplete in the body as well. The limbic system stores emotional experiences. So while the cognitive brain verbalizes them, this explains why talking about things is often easier than fully feeling them. We start to intellectualize, we create space, we create a buffer zone for ourselves so we don't actually have to touch that painful part of our experience. We can talk about it in a way that feels emotionless to a certain extent. Somatic therapy helps the body process and release trauma, so making it a really essential complement to traditional talk therapy. The way in which I like to sequence within my work is starting with body-based approaches and behavioral environmental changes, and then moving to the cognitive processing side of things. So there's a sequence to how to do these things. And I think finding that sequence that works for you, maybe starting with talking works really well for you and then going into the body-based stuff, but bringing it all together to create a really cohesive healing plan for yourself. Your gut health plays a massive role in emotional well-being. Do not overlook this. Optimizing your diet and the ways in which you nurture and nourish yourself can support better mood balance. Light exposure regulates sleep and mood. Morning sunlight in particular, reducing nighttime blue light can improve your emotional resilience tenfold. It's going to improve your sleep tenfold, and your sleep is literally going to regulate every other process in your body. And so if you can improve your sleep by getting out into the natural light as much as possible, giving yourself breaks as much as possible from screens, using things like blue light blocking glasses, warmer hues in light bulbs can really help, or lamps especially, can really help support your natural circadian rhythm. Simple integrative practices like breathwork, grounding, and movement can support your nervous system. So obviously I haven't given you specific resources and tools in this podcast episode, but definitely check out my Instagram for so many different techniques and resources that you can utilize to support your process. And what I will always say is, like, take what you like and leave what you don't. Some processes and techniques and resources are just not going to resonate with you, and that is okay. I want you to explore and experiment like a mad scientist and just try lots of different things to say, this feels really good, this feels neutral, or I don't like this at all, and I'm going to table this and come back to it, or just leave it where I left it, right? So if this episode has resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to send me a message on Instagram at Anna the Anxiety Coach. If you have found it helpful, please do share it with someone that might benefit from it as well. Until next time, remember, healing isn't just about the mind, it's about supporting your entire system, your entire nervous system, your whole body. Health is health. Take care, and I will see you in the next episode.